You're listening to the Diginauts on the Good Talk Podcast Network.
You found us. It's the Diginauts. This week, we're going to be discussing monkeys with cameras.
How long should you live?
And we'll revisit some of our previous segments, like self-driving cars, space travel, climate change, to discuss some of the things that happened this week.
Coming right up on this episode of the Diginauts.
Technology.
Legal issues.
Technology.
Human?
Technology.
Technology.
If I wanted to go home and eat my dog...
What if I just grow spare parts?
Diginauts.
Welcome to episode 4 of the Diginauts. I'm Eric.
And I am Darren. How's it going, Eric?
Not too bad.
Excellent.
But it's not going well for Samsung.
Oh my goodness, Samsung. Poor Samsung.
I don't feel bad for them.
You don't?
No.
Why? I root for the underdog.
They're a $1 billion company. They're fine.
Yeah, no, they are doing fine. And so anybody living in a technology cave who doesn't read, technology news as we do, Samsung this week decided to shutter the Note 7, it makes me sad because I recently went through a bunch of research of like, what am I going to get for my next phone? And there it is. There's my next phone. That's the thing I've been looking for. Not so much.
Not at all.
So the Samsung Note 7 is definitely sort of the top of mind segment this week. It's kind of the biggest digital development. But we thought, there's only so much we can say about that. Right?
Yeah, our thoughts burned up just like their replacements.
Oh, I see what you did there. Oh, yeah. One battery supplier. It's the battery supplier. That's the problem. Second battery supplier. Fool me twice. Anyway, yeah, sucks to be them. It's going to cost them, I heard today, something like $4 or $5 billion.
Wow. Over
this one piece of technology. But evidently the Galaxy is still selling well, so they're gonna continue. Anyway, there's lots of Apple Samsung we could get into, but at the end of the day, that just kind of wasn't where our mind was. So we decided to hit the newspaper because there's a lot of other top of mind stuff that happens to sync up with things that we've been talking about. In other words, there's been developments in items that we've talked about in each of our previous episodes, and we wanted to spend the first segment today going through some of those. So Eric, you remember from segment 1, we were talking about autonomous self-driving cars.
Right.
There's been a couple of developments. At the end of September in Germany, a self-driving Tesla smacked into the back of a tourist bus on the Autobahn.
Interesting.
Fortunately, nobody died this time. And we talked about this a little bit before. There was the one fatality in the U.S. I think it was Florida.
Yeah, not sure where, but
remember.
That guy pushed the limits, watching movies, allegedly, during his voyages and filming himself.
Well, and so this brings up the second one, which was in China, and evidently Tesla had to remove the word self-driving from their description. Wow. I assume over this, right? It's not autopilot, it's not lean back, it's like driver's assistant is more what they're kind of you
almost might as well call it one hand on the wheel. Like if you want to be safe,
it's that sort of driving with your knees level of control. Like, yes, go ahead and get something out of the glove compartment if you must, but don't take your eyes off the road. So that happened, and actually the German Transport Ministry responded by. Now, and I should say, this is Der Spiegel published an article, and they said that they saw something. It's not that the German government
what did they see?
Straight out said it. They said that they saw a report where the German government labeled the Tesla Autodrive as a traffic hazard. So they're a government that's full on kind of coming out and saying.
Interesting. I mean, it's in line with Elon Musk saying that at some point, like, human driving will be illegal.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, I saw a cool story that it was from the perspective of 100 years ago. That was like, wait. You used to let humans drive? Didn't a lot of people die? And then the response is like, well, yeah, they did. Well, thank goodness we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. We just got to get to that point in the perspective. And then the other development that happened is that they've been rolling out more Google auto-driving cars. This time they're minivans. And so the theory, this I was reading on theverge.com, and they were basically trying to guess. Like, so we've got some early pictures of what the Chrysler Pacifica minivan looks like, right?
Yeah. Bad choice. I don't like the Pacifica.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think they're going for sexy here.
Fair.
So nobody really knows what's going on, but the what they were theorizing in The Verge here is that this happened at the time that two different things happened that Google announced. One was that their Lexus auto-driving cars have now clocked 2 million miles.
I think Tesla's over 220 million.
Oh, yeah, probably.
So
Tesla may be further down this road, or they may be doing it differently.
I think it's going to be hard for anyone to catch up to what Tesla's doing. You know, they have their haters and doubters, but
if anybody's going to do it. Because here's the second item. They said that they are now pushing a ride-sharing service. So Google wants to get into carpooling.
Right.
And what the Verge article points out is, you know what's good for carpooling?
Maps?
Well, what kind of car did they use? It's a minivan.
Right.
So their theory is that the reason they're rolling these out is because it's related to their minivan, which is, I mean, it's just a guess, but it's pretty educated guess.
That's fair. I mean, even Tesla has alluded to in the future, like, you'll own your Tesla, but you'll also be able to dole it out to other people.
Oh, interesting. So you can kind of, when it's in the garage,
right,
it
someone
might
else
just kind of like
can summon it.
You can put it in off, or not on duty, off duty mode, right? And your garage door will just open, and the car will Knight Rider its way over to your neighbor's house because they need to go into the bar.
Right.
Interesting. I mean, all these technologies that are coming forward, as much as they're, potentially life-changing, they're life-changing in a way that's like, yeah, if there are minivans out there that are getting everybody to work, and if that means that the current number of lanes on the 405 can accommodate, the same number of people with far less cars, well, God bless it.
Right.
So the second news item that I wanted to bring up was from episode 2 of the Diginauts. We discussed space travel. And there's been some stuff happening in space travel over the last week. One is that President Obama wrote an op-ed for the New York Times, and gave a similar speech. I'm not sure exactly where he put forth his his point of view, but he basically said, "Yeah, let's get to Mars, 2030, guys, let's go to it." And he has announced that the U.S. government has basically started putting contracts together with private companies, saying we want a habitat that can get humans to Mars.
Yeah, I mean, there's also a little bit of a war that's breaking out in the context of who will be first to Mars. Elon Musk has long said he wants to colonize it. SpaceX will be the vehicle to do so, but Boeing, which is basically, NASA's left arm, basically said, no, we will be the first to Mars. So, you have Tesla, you have Elon Musk, you have the government and Boeing, and you have Bezos and with Blue Origin.
Right.
So, the race is on.
Yeah.
The space race is back.
Well, and the space race, it's not between countries this time. That's the interesting thing. If you think about every dystopian sci-fi picture in which corporations have taken over, right? It's like, are we rooting for an American to get there first? Are we rooting for an Amazonian to get there first? If Boeing puts this together, are they going to pick a Boeing employee or hire an astronaut? How does that work?
Well, I mean, I would imagine they would have an astronaut. I don't think they've ever sent their own employees. I don't know, though.
Right. Yeah, but they've been, as you say, left arm of government at this point, right? So it's really kind of the government who's been funding. And I don't know, maybe that's what Obama's trying to set up, is sort of like, hey, private companies, we're going to throw our money on it. You know, you go do your thing.
Right.
By the way, this will say NASA when it lands on Mars. I don't know.
Well, I don't know about that. Well, I see what you're saying.
Right. So if he's funding it, that might be part of the overall endeavor, right? As opposed to, you know, if you're Elon Musk, you maybe have a decision. Do I take the government money, or do I take my giant swimming pool full of $1,000 bills and you know, get there myself? Because his goal was late 2020s, I think.
I think so.
But he's not known for hitting deadlines.
It's all right. We'll give him some slack.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's interesting, and Obama's plan involves going into orbit first and then touching ground. But the other interesting thing that I caught, let me pull this up so I can say it right. There was a study out of I want to say UC Irvine. That's what I'm trying to look up. There was a study that basically said that if you're on your way to Mars, you're going to face a problem that they're calling space brain. And basically,
what is that?
Space brain is when you are exposed to so much radiation and high energy particles that normally the Earth's magnetosphere protects us from, right? That they kind of come out of the sun and bounce off and turn into the northern lights. That stuff, instead of becoming a beautiful aurora, will instead go into your neurons and scramble them up real good.
Nice.
So
time for some tardigrade proteins.
Yeah, exactly. Which ties right into something else that we talked about in the very same segment of that show, which was having the little water bear proteins that could help potentially, if we can learn from how their DNA protects from radiation, using the presence of this protein. So maybe there's going to be a little pill that the astronauts can pop that will help them get to Mars safely. But
they can grow tardigrades in Mars.
Sure, little water bear farms to harvest the protein. I mean, if we can't isolate it and replicate it, who knows, right? But it shows that there's definitely a little bit more complication beyond just like, let's get to Mars by 2030. You betcha. It's not just a matter of building a vehicle, right? It's we got to build a vehicle that you won't be insane in by the time you land, because that's where the technology level is right now.
Right.
Your brain gets fried, and evidently it could potentially lead to increased anxiety.
That's probably an understatement.
Yeah. And I think if you're the kind of person who, like, after a year and a half inside a 10-foot cube, I'm going to be having plenty of anxiety as it is, let alone having the parts of my brain that resist fear slowly be melted away by the sun.
So maybe you'll have no anxiety then.
No, that's not what they're thinking.
Sorry, you said resist. Yeah, never mind.
That's the so they did tests on rats, or mice, or some poor unfortunate rodent, and checked out what it was doing. And one of the things that they think is happening is that it's essentially getting the part of your brain that doesn't fear. That's one of the main areas that it fries out. So it's exactly the wrong thing to happen for an astronaut.
Right.
So that's exciting. So that's a wrinkle. That's a complication in the space travel. Here's hoping. We'll see. It's definitely going to be interesting. But I will say that what's fun about the space travel story is that we're really hearing people say, let's make this happen in our lifetimes. I mean, Musk was definitely saying, I want to get into the solar system, and I'm not one of the first people to Mars, but over the next 100 years, let's build a freeway or whatever you want to call it, to Pluto. And Obama is like, I want to hold my grandchildren on my shoulders and point up at the stars, and that's where
there's mommy.
Exactly. There's where some of your relatives live, right up there. So he's definitely saying, hey guys, let's make this happen in my lifetime. He's older than us, so theoretically we got a shot. We're going to talk about lifespan at the end of the show today, so we'll see. But the last piece that I wanted to revisit from some of our earlier segments was from episode 3, and this was regarding global warming. Remember that happy story?
I do.
About how Earth has passed the 400 parts per million carbon dioxide concentration level. The oh dear God, we're all going to die number. Well, there's been some developments. There's been some other predictions over the last week even that don't exactly leave a happy image to be believed.
Like what?
Well, one is that the American Southwest, given the current trends, faces the risk of what they're calling mega droughts. And I think the definition of that is where you have decades on end of drought.
Nice.
So we've just gone through a pretty significant drought here in California for the last couple years.
So are they categorizing that as the beginning of one?
No. If anything, that's a symptom of what's to come. When they say mega drought, they mean like, the area that's currently fed by the Colorado River, so like Arizona, Nevada, California, that area might be below what it needs for water for like 35 years straight, let's say.
Starting when? Like what's the time horizon?
Tuesday. So it's not a prediction that it's going to happen, but that's what the trends that we currently have going on do. That's what you could expect from the model. That basically, like, I believe it's not atmospheric, but it's that the Earth gets kind of thirstier as everything heats up a little bit, and the water goes away faster, et cetera, et cetera. But in the prediction models, what happens is the odds of a mega drought go from not very likely, which where we are right now, because once a drought happens, nature works in cycles, and at some point, everything's too dry, and water kind of builds up because of that and makes up for it. And like, for example, here in California, we had a pretty heavy rain year last year. Didn't quite make up for the drought, but water levels are back up to not quite scary levels. Well, no, they're still pretty scary, but we're not,
Does that mean other areas will become like a rainforest? Like, where's all this water going?
So, I mean, A, we don't know, right? And B, the models are complicated, so we don't really, you can't necessarily predict, right? So some of the ideas is that hurricanes get worse. Some of the ideas is that maybe the winters that we've been having in the Northeast are because of this. We should separate this from the mega drought idea. There's things that start to happen to air currents and things that start to happen to water currents as heating happens that even change the patterns that we've seen of like this current used to flow in a circle that way, and now it's going to flow at a slightly different angle, but that different angle, a degree or two here, means that that this the jet stream lands in Britain where it used to land in France. And then back to the drought thing, the idea is basically because of these fluctuations that are happening in result of global climate change, we wind up with the risk of one of these mega droughts that lasts for 35 or more years is their definition. So half an adult lifetime.
Wow.
The risk of one of those in the American Southwest goes up to like 20-50% chance. Like flip a coin that you're going to have a mega drought in the first half of the century and flip a coin again for the second half of the century. So that's what scientists are now predicting is possible for a whole region of the country. Nice. And by the way, the region of the country that produces 90% of America's
fruits
and nuts and veggies. Yeah. Not the grains. That's the breadbasket. But a lot of the other agricultural products are right out here. Hooray! Now, the good thing that comes out of this is that you're going to cut those odds in half if you can dramatically reduce greenhouse gases. And there's an attempt going on this very week to do that. Now, here, this is pretty exciting. Have you heard about the conference that's currently going on in Rwanda?
No.
You haven't?
Of all places?
Well, it's got to meet somewhere, right? It's 150 countries gathering to talk about this. And this is where I get annoyed as an American. I spend a fair amount of time online. I watch the news. I read Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I hadn't heard about this. No. I heard 900 things about Donald Trump's orange head face, but whatever that guy, right? But nothing about this.
WikiLeaks.
Yeah, and exactly. There's all that stuff distracting us. And meanwhile, we're going to have droughts that last for decades if we don't do something. There are world leaders currently gathering to discuss doing something. And I bet most people don't even know the problem that they're discussing. And it is what's called HFCs. HFCs are what we used to replace CFCs.
So equally as bad, or what?
Or worse. So basically, if you remember from the 80s, there was all that big hair that everybody had in the 80s came with a price. That the propellant used in hairspray was CFCs, and the aerosol cans were releasing stuff in nasty greenhouse gases that would
eat the ozone.
Yeah. And so we have the hole over the ozone layer in the Antarctic. Which is allowing for it. And it is healing up. So hooray. But it's done its damage that there's that much more UV light getting through, heating everything up. Well, Antarctica is confusing because the ice there actually grows when it gets, again, the currents are complicated. But the point of the story is that in America, the United Nations, we got together, we said, gosh, these CFCs are terrible. Let's stop using them. You can no longer buy hairspray in America that has propellants that use CFCs. So some progress was made. The ozone hole is shrinking, and I think sometimes is almost gone over the Antarctica. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think we got some. We're not out of the woods on that.
So what's so bad about these HFCs?
Well, so I'm glad you asked because they essentially then started using HFCs as a replacement in a lot of places. And we should say this is a worldwide conference. Some people are still using CFCs. The HFCs are something like 10,000 times worse as greenhouse gases than carbon dioxide.
Who came up with this idea? No, seriously.
Yeah. And guess what we use HFCs in? Air conditioners.
Wow.
So as the world gets hotter, we try our best to cool it back down. And the technology that we use to cool it back down, in fact, makes it hotter, which makes us use more cooling. Oh, God bless America. Yeah, and so...
What company makes these HFCs?
Oh, it's everywhere.
Yeah, but there has to be someone who's making it, who's making a killing off it.
No,
pun intended.
So it's not like... I'm not sure. I don't believe it's like, Dow Chemical is cranking out HFCs. It's more the processes that have been developed in order to do things like run an air conditioner. One of their byproducts is HFCs.
Oh, I see.
Right. So this is, the case for a bunch of stuff. To the point that if you take, according to this article, if you take 1 kilogram of HFCs and release that into the atmosphere, it would be the equivalent of you riding your bike and never getting in your car for 3 years. Yeah. So that's good stuff.
So wait a minute. You're saying if I rode my bike for that many years, I would be emitting HFCs?
No. You might emit some methane here and there. which is, it should be said, is a greenhouse gas. No, what it's saying is that the amount of carbon dioxide you would save, the amount of carbon dioxide that you would produce in those 3 years of driving a car around is offset by a single kilogram of HFCs. In other words, they're much, much, much worse.
Right.
They're like in the degree of like 10,000s.
Gotcha.
Times worse than some of the other greenhouse gases.
Again, like I'd love to know whose brilliant idea was to shift to these HFCs.
Well, everybody thought they were doing a great thing by no longer using CFCs.
And didn't look into the impact of HFCs? Come on.
You got to understand, though, that like who's going to do that? Scientists. And who's listening to the scientists? Nobody. So, I mean, yeah, there are people who are aware of this. In the Obama administration has done some stuff in their plan, in the CAP law, that helps the U.S. government to do as little as possible with HFCs. But that doesn't mean industries aren't doing it. That doesn't mean other countries aren't doing it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the nice thing is that this is an attempt to, get a global effort to talk about reducing. And they're considering it sort of the biggest step that we're taking since the Paris Agreement. So, potentially, if everybody could stop watching our political debates and pay attention to this and exert a little bit of political pressure, then maybe we could do something to slow the rates. That said, I've seen graphs that project U.S. HFC releases and continuing to grow and grow into the next decade or two. So here's hoping they accomplish something, but it's scary. It's going to take a lot more political will than we've got right now, and hopefully we don't go past the point of, maybe we're already past the point of no return on that.
Well, I mean, even if there's a replacement, they've got to vet the replacement. It can't turn into something that's 100,000 times worse.
We use something else. Well, supposedly, like for propellants, sometimes people are using like nitrous oxide, and of course, then there's the kids will grab the nitrous oxide and inhale it or whatever, or just like nitrogen propellants. So there are alternatives that would be a little more innocuous. They may or may not work. I think it's the cooling that's like the main area that it sounds like we got to do a little bit of study in order to figure out what comes next. So here's hoping on that. And it should be said, even if the HFCs, get reduced, we've still got the carbon dioxide, which, as we discussed, is over 400 parts per million. So we've got some technology to get caught up on.
Indeed.
Okay, listen, today's business is distributed. Nobody goes to an office. You got a mobile phone, you got a computer, you got voicemail. They're all over the place. Wouldn't you like to have them all in one place in the cloud? Well, you can. Grasshopper is your solution. Go to goodtalknetwork.com, click on the ads space, click on the banner for Grasshopper, and you can get a complete system that allows you to keep your existing number, get a toll-free local number, multiple extensions, all your communication needs all in one place.
In this segment, Jurisprudent, it's basically where we talk about kind of the combination of tech, legal issues, and kind of the outcomes that people have to face as a result of whether it be rightful or wrongful decisions.
Because the Venn diagram of techies and judges doesn't overlap as much as we'd like it to.
Definitely not. In this case, David J. Slater is a photographer, and he was in the wilderness, like literally deep in a jungle, and he set his camera down, and a monkey picked it up. Now, you would think, like, wow, a monkey, he's never seen a camera before. He's probably just curious. And he starts taking photos and photos and photos and more photos. And eventually, David gets his camera back, eventually looks at the footage, and he's like, oh my God, these are amazing photos. And it just so happened that the monkey named Naruto took amazing selfie photos of himself.
Mm-hmm. This doesn't surprise me. My son, who is now 2, like when he was about 1, was when he discovered my phone, and he captured his first selfie of himself drooling while looking at the phone, completely by accident.
Nice.
So I got to figure 1-year-old boy is probably equivalent to a mature monkey.
Right. Now, what's interesting, these photos were posted all over the internet, and PETA, the animal rights advocacy group and nonprofit, sued the photographer because this photographer was basically claiming copyright to these photos. But he didn't take these photos. This monkey did. So why should this photographer have copyright to these photos? He only owned the camera.
Okay. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because so brilliant maneuver on the part of PETA.
Right.
Right? Because so to me, the easiest thing in the world to sort of draw a distinction is at the level of species. So we can be like, this all applies to humans and nothing else applies to anybody else, right? So we have laws about like, don't abuse, don't beat up, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, if I wanted to go home and eat my dog, I could, right?
If you're hungry.
I don't have a dog.
Anymore.
Exactly. Not since last night's dinner, I don't. But no, seriously, like I don't think there's a law against that, right?
Against eating dogs?
Sure.
Oh, I'm not so sure about that.
Why? There's certainly parts of the world where it's done.
Parts of the world, but I don't think LA approves of dog connoisseurs.
But we eat cows. I don't see the difference personally. Now, that's one man's take.
Do you have a pet cow?
I don't have a pet cow.
Why not?
Is pet the definition of whether something's edible or not?
No.
You're talking to a farm boy where we had most of our dinner had a name when we were kids. So anyway, and this will be, you can send all your hate tweets to eFader. That's my Twitter handle.
Digital Darren, preferably.
No, but in all seriousness, like there's kind of like lines there, and when it comes to something like intellectual property, so brilliant of PETA to attempt. So what happened in the courts? Did it wind up that the monkey owns the rights?
Well, there was an earlier court case in January, and the judge ultimately dismissed the monkey selfie suit, as it's called, basically determining that a non-human animal could not own a copyright, which I disagree with. Like, that human had nothing to do with this photo. He shouldn't own it. That monkey took it.
Right. No, so I get you. And I think the judge is responding the same way I am. That it's a slippery slope that as soon as you say the monkey owns the copyright, then that opens the door for you have to draw a line. And to me, it's easy to draw a line between human and non-human, between animal and plant. These are places where you can draw lines, right? And as soon as you introduce gray area legally into what personship is, then, such a huge can of worms, right? What if a robot takes a picture? Does the robot own the does that mean that robots are people? Does this mean that monkeys are people?
It doesn't mean they're people. I mean, I think the monkey has rights, and I think that's the guys under
right. And this is why PETA is given their interests is so wise to move on behalf of the monkey, because it creates a little bit of legal precedent. It creates a foothold of rights that we haven't assigned to non-humans. So what happened? There was a follow-up case?
I think more recently in August, PETA filed an appeal to their decision that I just mentioned.
Okay.
So,
and is that where we stand now?
Yeah, back on the docket.
Interesting. Interesting. And at the very beginning of this, I just chastised judges for not being, techie enough, but but I'm aligning myself with the first judge. So it's interesting, right? If you get a judge who falls more on the side of like let's expand what, I don't know, humanity means, what personship means.
I don't think it's.
But it's simple if you say nobody owns the copyright, right? Because the first judge didn't find that the owner of the camera owned the picture, did he? Or we don't know that.
To follow up, I don't know. I mean, I think inherently, if the monkey doesn't own it, I don't think all of a sudden it becomes
public domain,
right?
So it fell back to the human.
I believe so.
Interesting. Yeah, because it's kind of hard to shake the idea that, well, someone must own the rights to the pictures.
Right.
Legal gray area. This is the stuff we talk about. So, at home, what do you think? Let us know. Should it be the monkey's picture? Should it be the camera owner's picture? Should it be nobody's picture? What do you think and why? Tweet us.
Are you looking to increase your technical knowledge in things like WordPress, Joomla, Google Analytics, even SEO? Well, if you are, you should go to goodtalknetwork.com/ads and look for OS training.
In segment 3 today, we're going to introduce a brand new segment. It is called Semantically Incorrect. And the idea here is that technology is moving so fast the English language can't keep up. So we're going to look at places where we need a new word, basically, to describe human use of technology. So today's technology awkwardness, language technology awkwardness, is I never know what to say about books that I've read when I didn't read them.
So you're talking about audiobooks?
Yes, exactly. So I've been in conversations before where I will say to somebody like, oh yeah, I read that last week, or I'm reading that during my commute, right? And it sounds obviously
dangerous.
It sounds wrong to say you're reading it during your commute.
You need an autonomous vehicle.
Even if you were in a Tesla, it would be dangerous to say you were reading, The Great Gatsby on your way to work. Whereas you can certainly do that in audiobooks, and we don't have a good word to describe what you are doing.
What about I listen to?
I listened to Great Gatsby? I mean, kind of. So this is the idea behind this segment, is we will attempt to come up with our suggestions for what this should be called. And then we, by all means, please, listening audience, solve this for us. Please, please, please. So I've heard people refer to the sort of noun side of it as audio. So, you get a self-help, quote-unquote, book.
Right.
And as you're listening to it, they will say like, oh, well, good job, you bought this. Well, they can't say book because you didn't buy a book.
Right.
In the print edition, you probably bought a book. So I've heard some editors or authors or narrators, whoever made the decision, switch it to audio. You bought this audio at the store, and as you're listening to this audio, as opposed to reading this book, right? When they're actually
they call it audiobook.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I have always called them the full thing audiobook, but I've heard more than one audiobook where they said, congratulations on purchasing this audio.
Interesting.
Or we hope you learned from this audio or whatever.
Right.
So that word audio is starting to take on a slightly different form and replace the word book a little bit. Which, to me, that's not the part that needs fixing, right? Like, I don't care if the narrator says, hey, you're listening to this book, right, while I'm listening to a tape. I'm okay. I mean, I get that it's not correct, but it doesn't bother me as much as it bothers me to say that I read a book that I didn't actually sit down and read. I don't know if it comes back to like, you know, 4th grade summer library where you had credit for the number of pages you actually sat down, and instead of going out on the swings and you like read the book, and like I feel like I need to earn it. Whereas I don't quite feel like I earned it by listening to it as much. Somebody else did the work of causing those little black shapes on the white paper to turn into thought pieces.
Right.
So we need. I think we need. You know, you're right. I listened to that book, but that seems weird, right? That seems like a crazy person,
right? Putting my ear to a.
I had thought when I was trying to think through this segment, I had thought that similar to what you're thinking. I heard the book, but that seems so.
That one seems weird.
Yeah, I'm hearing that book on the way to work. Right? It doesn't seem right. So
no. That's why listening seems natural.
Listening's okay, but it doesn't quite have that same, because it's most likely to be past tense. Oh, have you ever read Wuthering Heights? Yeah, I listened to it. Right? Like that's part of it is right. Like that sort of that you want to make the distinction. I do, at least. Maybe it's just me. Maybe you know, millennials care less because they never started reading anyway. I don't know. They never had a non-internet world in which reading was the only way to entertain themselves.
Well, everyone thought audio books would kill, you know, a lot of the printed books.
Right.
But, you know, not so much.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you read on Kindle?
Rarely.
Okay. Do you read?
Sometimes.
Right.
I listen.
Right. Okay. See, so close. I mean, so do you listen to audiobooks quite a bit?
I don't.
Okay. So you're not the audience.
I'm not.
The people listening to us right now theoretically should be the audience, right?
Sure.
These are people with commutes where they need someone like us to tickle their fancy for an hour on their way instead of having to think about what they're going to do when they get to their cubicle. So listeners, tell us. I have a thought that I like. It's a little bit wacky, but it works for me.
Say it.
Here it comes. It's not very good. I'm losing confidence as I'm getting ready to say it. But I A-booked it. Let me make my case. 2 syllables. Right? Distinct from I read that book. Right? Obviously, I read that book is more simplistic, but that's because we've had centuries to get used to the idea of I read that book. Right? I A-booked it on the way here.
Almost sounds like you went double speed.
Yeah, but I mean, so you're getting a bit of a technology vibe off of it. I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I'm A-booking that. See, because when you're replacing the word, you need a verb that's going to work in both past tense and present tense and be clear, right? Because I also thought about I audioed it. But that's hard to say.
Right. But I could be like, I'm currently listening to, you know, Harry Potter. I listened to Harry Potter.
But you had to say, I am currently listening to, right? I am listening to,
well, I can
as opposed to, I'm A-booking that on the way to work.
Well, I can say, on the way to work, I listened to Harry Potter.
I listened to?
Yeah.
You would say I'm listening to. Right? I mean, so my counterexample, if you chose that arrangement, would be I A-book Harry Potter on the way to work. But you wouldn't say that. You'd say I'm A-booking, and you wouldn't say I listen to either, right? I listen to, it's the difference between, and I'm going to nerd out for a second, right? And it's like the difference between past and past perfect or whatever. It has something to do with, I don't know, participles. But one of them means that you're doing it at a specific time, and the other one means that you're doing it over a range of time, and that's why you would say I'm listening to Harry Potter on the way to work. So I'm proposing I'm A-booking Harry Potter.
I don't know, the A, it's...
I'm saving 2 syllables, maybe that... Yeah, no, I agree with you. Unfortunately, when you're creating new words, right? Like, you do now say you're emailing people.
Right.
We needed a word to describe what that was.
Yep.
I'm electronic mailing you became I'm emailing you.
Right.
You know what? I'm gaining confidence in this as I go. I'm A-booking it. I A-booked The Road by Cormac McCarthy. It was a dreary commute. I A-booked it. Audience, it's up to you to...
let's see if it takes off from here. You heard it here first.
Hey, I mean, let's coin some words.
Or you A-podded it here first.
You A-podded it? You don't say you audio maybe
not?
That will become the
A-pod.
Well, once A-book catches on, then A-pod will make it a lot more sense. Or if you're listening and you have a better suggestion, let us know, because I can't handle saying I read a book that I didn't actually read. Maybe it's just my neurosis. It's not, though. We need to fix this as a society. Help us out. If you are looking for brand identity on the cheap, and I do mean cheap, Logo Nerds is the place to go. Do you need a header design for your blog, your website? Maybe a personal avatar to use on your Twitter page? Maybe you just did a CD and you want to put a logo on it? Well, you can get a bunch of designs, super cheap, $27 for 3 different designs and then revisions. How are you going to beat that? You're not. So go to goodtalknetwork.com, click on ads, click on Logo Nerds, and help support this podcast. It's time for What's Your Take? Segment 4, we're going to explore human aging. So Eric, what do you think your chances are of living to, say, 120?
Not high unless I'm growing replacement organs and cells.
Yeah, they're not great. So right now, according to an article that was published in Nature, although I'm looking at sciencealert.com because you have to pay for Nature and I'm cheap, I'm reading the summary of the article summarizing the article instead of the actual article. The authors of the original paper suggest that your chances of living past 125 are less than 1 in 10,000. Which I gotta say...
Has anyone lived past that yet?
So the human record is 122 years, set by a woman in France by the name of Jean Clement, which is probably pronounced in a French way that I can't pronounce. Calment. So that is the current record for the longest known human life. Now, there's always some dude in India who says he's 196 and there's sort of no way to prove it or whatever. Right. But the we know this person was that old record is 122. So what the main gist of this paper is, it says that there could be a limit to human lifespan and we might have already hit it.
And I guess what indicators are they using to even determine that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. In theory, for most of human civilization, our lifespan has gotten bigger and bigger, right? If you go through the history of medical science and all the time that we've tracked the average age that a human would live, it goes back to times where some of the first, obviously there's agriculture and fire. These are going to be things that, help us live longer, right? But we then got into kind of the modern age and medicine started. One of the biggies in increasing lifespan is childbirth. The odds that a baby survives are significantly higher than they were, say, 150 years ago, 200 years ago.
But is that now dropping?
No, that number is continuing to go up. But the point is that if you looked at human lifespan, right, it was, on average, it was, say, in the 20s for cave people. But that isn't because humans died in their 20s. It's because it's averaging out human life. So the oldest cave people would get into their 40s, 50s, the gray hairs.
Ancients.
Exactly, ancients. And it's not that humans couldn't live into their 60s or 70s. They could if they didn't get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or anything along the way.
Right.
But more likely, disease is going to take its share, and et cetera, et cetera. But the average is being brought down because of a couple things. One, pregnancy used to be, I don't want to say a 50-50 proposition, but it's not far off from that. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it was babies didn't live near as often as they do now. And then women didn't survive childbirth near as often as they did now, right? The complications that we can handle kind of routinely.
Right.
I think cesareans are a larger percentage than you would think. But a significant number of those would have led in a double death in earlier days. So you start with that, right? So the average goes up as we get better and better at that. Then you introduce vaccines, which then, suddenly childhood polio isn't killing off, or the bubonic plague isn't sweeping out millions of people. All of these are things that bring the average down. So again, maybe humans are still living into their 70s or 80s, but the average is lower, and now it's creeping up as we do more and more of these things. And so we get to where nowadays our average is in the 70s or 80s. So as we've taken care of some of the diseases in the childbirth side of things, you've actually got a decent shot of reaching your elder years.
Yes.
Hooray! Well, so now what happens is they said, okay, they wanted to theorize how long it could possibly go. If suppose that we remove all disease from the equation, right? What if we can just stop everything that kills us naturally? Does that mean that we get older and older and older? So what they did is they started looking at the number of people who got older than 110. And it turns out that, yes, the number of people reaching that level is growing, right? Because we're more likely to reach old age. But the average time that people die isn't getting bigger since about the 90s. So we've reached a place where we're removing enough disease that, in theory, we should be, that average number, right? The 122 record should be going up, but it's not. So their theory is that 125 might just sort of be as long as a human can make it. Even if you cure cancer and remove all disease.
What if I just grow spare parts and can swap them in and swap them out?
Yeah, I mean, if organ failure is part of it, sure. Absolutely. I mean, and then maybe you could even get to that place where, right, you have a house and then you replace the living room and then you replace the kitchen and you replace both bedrooms. Is it the same house that it was when you started? If you've replaced every part, right? Yeah, exactly.
It's better.
Maybe we can do that to the human body, but we don't know necessarily if that means that the human body will live any longer than 125. Now, they don't know, right? It's certainly possible that new technologies will come along that will, push things even further. What they do know is that looking at the data of sort of how that lifespan has increased, we have reached a place where the top level has plateaued. And so those people have already made it past all the diseases and everything, and then they just kind of die of what we call of old age, right? So then what happens, right? So maybe that just represents a natural endpoint to human life. Does that sit well with Jeff Bezos or Bezos?
Probably not. And this 10,000-year clock.
Right. So there's tech billionaires out there attempting to. So I should say before we get into that, one of the theories is, yeah, that's nice. Don't mess with it. If 125 is the cap, so be it.
Right.
But let's make those 125 really sweet. Right? Let's worry about making arthritis go away. Let's worry about increasing bone density. Et cetera, et cetera. So all the things that would make people's 80s and 90s, if your 80s and 90s could feel like your 40s, then do you need to live much longer? I mean, that would be a
80's
great
the new
improvement.
40.
Yeah, absolutely. Wouldn't that be
That'd be
amazing? All of this stuff won't happen in our lifetime, I'm afraid to say. Although, again, as I mentioned last time, the singularity is supposed to be somewhere in the 2040s. So we get a bunch of people on Mars, and then down here we've got young robot bodies to download our brains into. That's what I'm hoping for. As everything's falling apart on me, I just want to switch right out, away from all my things that are falling apart. Oh, God. Yeah. So anyway, some people are saying, well, let's just worry about quality of life, not life expectancy, right? If that number can't get any better, maybe you can't stretch out the swimming pool to a wider length, but maybe you can fill the swimming pool deeper, right? Kind of thing. And then, meanwhile, there's lots of tech billionaires pouring money into the idea of exactly this. Can we increase, So Eric, for you, how long would you live if you got to pick?
If I had to pick?
If you got to say how long you're going to live, how long would you live?
As in a guess or my
No,
aspiration?
Your choice.
My choice? Infinity.
Really?
Yeah.
You just live forever and ever and ever?
Why not?
I don't know. I mean, we discussed all sorts of impending doom. If you're going to live infinity years, I certainly wouldn't buy property in the American Southwest.
I might not have to because no one else would be living.
Yeah. I hope in your infinite years that you come up with some solutions for some of those.
I'll leverage my infinite wisdom.
So you'll live forever, and then the sun will blow up, and that'll be what takes you out.
Maybe.
It's interesting. Well, so that's what we're asking. What's your take? Everybody listening at home, how long do you want to live? Is it okay for humans to mess with nature in this way, right? Should we be increasing the lifespan? Should we be increasing the quality of life? Should we be going after both? Should we be leaving it alone? Should we, and where do you draw the line? Is it when humans start to mix with robots? When the pills start to require,
batteries?
Exactly. But maybe not batteries, but perhaps, stem cells, for example. Is that a place where you draw a line? Or, we can do it. We can extend your life, but rabbits have to die because we need, a protein that they like our little water bear cousins to survive the radiation. What if we discover that, for every fluffy little lemur that we kill, 10,000 humans can live another year? So what are the sort of moral implications for you listening to us surrounding human life expectancy? Let us know. You can call us at 323-686-8255 and leave a voicemail. We'll share it on the show. You can email us at goodtalknetwork@gmail.com. I should fix that and make it something cooler. Or you can tweet us. Just hit us up straight. You are
eFader.
And I am at Digital Darren, which is spelled DERON for some reason. Tell us what you think. And we'd love to talk to you more about it in a future episode. That's it for this week. Thanks very much for listening.
Good talk.